Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today, it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some poetry of interest, and I also wanted to go back to a favorite and familiar poet, a confessionalist, as that is one of my favorite schools of poetry. And today's poem is all about flowers and recovering in a hospital. I'm referring to Tulips by Sylvia Plath. I talked about Sylvia Plath on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail. I believe you can look into the video that I did on either Daddy or Cinderella to find out more information about her. But for those who don't know, she was a poet who lived in the 1900s. She was known for writing confessionalist poetry about the self and about the world that she saw around her, often focusing on mental health and focusing on her personal lived experience, talking about family members and whatnot. She was married to another poet named Ted Hughes. A lot of people have speculated that that marriage wasn't that great and may have contributed to Sylvia Plath's negative mental health. And unfortunately, Sylvia killed herself in the 1960s, which is not good. And a lot of people are especially get mad at Ted Hughes because he published her poetry after the fact. And given that a lot of poetry was about how much she didn't like Ted or the troubles in their marriage, some people said it felt a little exploitative and whatnot. So not good. But Sylvia Plath is indeed remembered very fondly. And I have a love for her poetry and the power of it as well. And I think some of that power is on display here. But without further ado, let's talk about Tulips. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. Tulips. The tulips are too excitable. It is winter here. Look how white everything is, how quiet, how snowed in. I am learning peacefulness, lying by myself quietly, as the light lies on these white walls, this bed, these hands. I am nobody. I have nothing to do with explosions. I have given my name and my day clothes up to the nurses, and my history to the anesthetist, and my body to the surgeons. They have propped my head between the pillow and the sheet cuff, like an eye between two white lids that will not shut. Stupid pupil, it has to take everything in. The nurses pass and pass, they are no trouble. They pass the way gulls pass inland in their white caps, doing things with their hands, one just the same as another, so it is impossible to tell how many there are. My body is a pebble to them, they tend it as water tends to the pebbles it must run over, smoothing them gently. They bring me numbness in their bright needles, they bring me sleep. Now I have lost myself, I am sick of baggage, my patent leather overnight case like a black pillbox. My husband and child smiling out of the family photo, their smiles catch onto my skin, little smiling hooks. I have let things slip, a 30-year-old cargo boat stubbornly hanging on to my name and address. They have swabbed me clear of my loving associations, scared and bare on the green plastic pillowed trolley. I watch my tease-it, my bureaus of linen, my books sink out of sight, and the water went over my head. I am a nun now. I have never been so pure. I didn't want any flowers. I only wanted to lie with my hands turned up and be utterly empty. How free it is. You have no idea how free. The peacefulness is so big it dazes you. And it asks nothing. A name tag, a few trinkets. It is what the dead close on finally. I imagine them shutting their mouths on it like a communion tablet. The tulips are too red in the first place. They hurt me. Even through the gift paper, I could hear them breathe lightly through their white swaddlings like an awful baby. Their redness talks to my wound. It corresponds. They are subtle. They seem to float, though they weigh me down, upsetting me with their sudden tongues and their color. A dozen red lead sinkers round my neck. Nobody watched me before, now I am watched. The tulips turn to me in the window behind me, where once a day the light slowly widens and slowly thins, and I see myself flat, ridiculous, a cut paper shadow between the eye of the sun and the eyes of the tulips, and I have no face. I have wanted to efface myself. The vivid tulips eat my oxygen. Before they came, the air was calm enough, coming and going, breath by breath, without any fuss. Then the tulips filled it up like a loud noise. Now the air snags and eddies round them the way a river snags and eddies round a sunken rust-red engine. They concentrate my attention, that was happy, playing and resting without committing itself. The walls also seem to be warming themselves. The tulips should be behind bars like dangerous animals. They are opening like the mouth of some great African cat. And I am aware of my heart. It opens and closes. Its bowl of red blooms out of sheer love of me. The water I taste is warm and salt like the sea, and comes from a country far away as health. And so that was Tulips. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with this poem. In terms of narrative, what seems to be happening is the narrator is in a hospital recovering from something. Ted Hughes has said that Sylvia wrote it when she was recovering in the hospital from an appendectomy. But you could also interpret this, given that Sylvia's history here, and it doesn't have to be about Sylvia. It could be about an unnamed narrator, like going and having a stay in a mental health facility. I think that happened to Sylvia once or twice, based on the depression that she felt throughout her life, like it could be like this person is trying to get some rest, trying to experience some peacefulness in between their bout of poor mental health, and like it seems to be helping them. Like they say that the nurses are tending to them, and like there's a sense of peacefulness. They're learning the peacefulness. Like they say, I am learning peacefulness, lying by myself quietly as the light lies on these white walls. So learning how to be peaceful with oneself, which is not an easy thing to do. A lot of people have to learn meditation, learn mindfulness and whatnot. As the person is in the hospital, there is an increasing awareness of tulips, of these flowers that seem to be watching them, even though tulips can't do that. And the narrator's like, nobody watched me before, but now these tulips are, and it's making them uncomfortable. But at the same time, they feel like it's opening something within them, opening their heart. And they feel like their heart blooms, and they feel a little bit better by the end of this poem, so a bit more optimistic. A big aspect of this poem is the desire to be seen, but also being afraid of being seen, which is something I've talked about in other poems. I can't recall the specific one, but it is something that comes up with a lot of poets. You see this in a later verse where the narrator says, "I didn't want any flowers. I only wanted to lie with my hands turned up and be utterly empty." And like just be there with the peacefulness. They don't want any company. And then in the next verse, the narrator says, "The tulips are too red in the first place. They hurt me. Even through the gift paper, I could hear them breathe lightly through their white swaddlings like an awful baby," which is a very interesting thing for someone who has had a baby to write. Like, it certainly might say a few things about Sylvia Plath and whether she wanted to be a mother or something like that. And then in the next verse, the narrator says, "Nobody watched me before, now I am watched. The tulips turn to me in the window behind me, where once a day the light slowly widens and slowly thins." And then, like as the poem goes on, you hear them kind of becoming more accepting of these tulips, where they say, "The walls also seem to be warming themselves. The tulips should be behind bars like dangerous animals. They're opening like the mouth of some great African cat, and I am aware of my heart, it opens and closes its bowl of red blooms out of sheer love of me." And so even though they're afraid of these tulips, they are sensing a greater love opening within their hearts. So these tulips are doing something good for the narrator in this poem. And so, you could interpret it like, they're in the hospital, they want to be alone, but someone put tulips there, and now that's helping them. Maybe helping them recover from the appendectomy, or recovering from their like whatever mental health trouble they're dealing with in that current moment. And then just the last thing worth noting about this poem, there's a lot to talk about, but something that stands out to me in particular are the sort of rhyming, or the consonants that Sylvia Plath uses, not only in this poem, but she uses it in a variety of other ones too. You see this early on in the poem with, "As the light lies on these white walls, this bed, these hands, I am nobody. I have nothing to do with explosions." And then she says, "I have given my name and my day clothes up to the nurses, and my history to the anesthesists, and my body to the surgeons," which are words that sort of sound the same there. And you see this scattered throughout the poem, which helps with the rhythm and feel of the poem, and makes it feel more lively, in my opinion. So very interesting sort of theme she's working with, but also the structure of the poem makes it stand out too. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Tulips by Sylvia Plath. A pretty good poem, which I was probably not really gonna, or like, I wasn't surprised that it was good because it's Sylvia Plath, and I love Sylvia Plath, so of course I'd probably love this poem. I highly recommend it to you out there if you haven't read it before. I'll put a link to it in the description so you can read it and, let me know your thoughts, not only on my review, but also on the poem itself, what stands out to you in particular. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poet or this poem if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and hospital recovery travels. Farewell.